Well, so as you can see on the screen here, a video that I uploaded 2 years ago called Feminist Inspired Gender Friendly Nurseries. It's pretty much as heinous as it sounds. Nurseries that are kind of set up in a manner where gender neutrality is encouraged, and the nasty, evil, detrimental gender stereotypes are left at the door, essentially. And the overhanging theme behind it all is to essentially empower girls. It's always the same routine, really, is it not? They always make the claims, of course, that this will help boys as well. It's beneficial to the boys, but it's not really about the boys. It's about the girls. They claim that stereotypes, they manifest in very early years. So if they can eradicate them from as young as possible, then that will help the women of the future become the CEOs and the politicians that they couldn't be in past generations because of those evil little stereotypes that exist. But I thought that this project, if you will, kind of died a death because after that video I never really heard much more about it. And it wasn't until I made the video about the Feminist Council maybe about a month ago now, where I went through a bit of the website, and then after I finished recording I even went back onto it to look a bit further into some of the resources and stuff that they had, and there was a hyperlink to the friendly nurseries, if you will, and it was a kind of dead link. The website was there, but there was nothing on it. So I just assumed, kind of reaffirmed my belief that it was just a dead project. It didn't really work out. But then I came across something else about a week and a half ago. Just obviously with my mic being a temperamental little ball bag at the moment, I never got around to making the video. But they make reference to the gender friendly nursery. It's very much still a prominent feature, at least in the Glasgow area. So I'll come on to that in a second, but obviously this was the video I made at the time where I went through the publication that was out about it. And I do remember parts of it. I mean, I never watched this video back to kind of give myself a sort of refresher, if you will. But, it was irritating to read at the time. I wasn't as clued up. I was getting there, but I wasn't as clued up as I am now. I'm not implying I'm a big brain or that. I'm just meaning that back then I was starting to kind of move away from what I used to talk about on a regular, and I was kind of starting to find myself more and more engulfed in publications and resources, etc. That was still kind of learning the ropes, if you will, as to where it all stemmed from, really. But yeah, that was one of the first publications, if I recall correctly, where I was shocked. Just the title alone, The staff are also very clear in the need to engage with parents on the topic of gender, to not only challenge their attitudes and practice around gender, but to reinforce the good work that takes place in the nursery environment. There was a commonly held acceptance among staff that although addressing gender in the nursery setting is crucial, there was also so much impact nurseries can have as children will inevitably be influenced more by what happens at home or when they move on to primary school. So again, no, it's this is this very malevolent theme that's been occurring in Scotland for some time, where they have actively gone out of their way to try and target children as young as possible to eradicate gender stereotypes, which does have detrimental effects despite the fact they claim otherwise, and it doesn't have the desired outcomes that they claim that they hope will occur, and this is all happening obviously with the backdrop of a crisis that's unfolding, a legitimate crisis as opposed to the manufactured ones that we're all surrounded in. And I'm talking about birth rates plummeting, with abortion so easily obtainable, and the fact that even suggesting settling down or motherhood, etc., family life, traditionalism, it's not talked about, it's frowned upon essentially in progressive Scotland. It's all about empowering girls. You can't have it both ways. You can't promote feminism and simultaneously having girls in school consider the fact that if things continue as they are, trends continue, birth rates stay as they are, things might get a lot worse for the country. Giving them the option, something to think about, that motherhood is a viable option. No, can't be having these conversations. It's just not possible. Instead, we have to continue to promote feminist fucking cancer. So anyway, as I said, this was in 2019, and then I came across this video. As I said, this is called Equalities. It's an equality series. It's supposedly a parenting group, Glasgow parent group, right? But it came from a Twitter handle, obviously, and it's one of the proverbial anti-racist organisations that are rife on Twitter, especially in Scotland. So naturally, I clicked on the link that was provided, but it took me to these videos as opposed to what I was expecting. And, well, it didn't disappoint necessarily, because I was able to find out that this is still very much a thing. So instead of me going for a publication, I thought, why not just let the woman herself explain it? You know? Before I do that, actually, I'll show you the names of the people that give their 2 cents in this video, because there's a few segments and each individual takes a turn to explain their part or how things operate. It's remarkable. And this is supposed to be something that parents might watch back and be reassured about. If I found out that my child was having to suffer some of the nonsense that children are forced to endure in schools in Scotland these days, be pulled out of school very swiftly, irrespective of whether or not I was in a position to homeschool. Because quite frankly, as I said on Telegram regarding global citizenship, a post that I put up yesterday, I'd rather an illiterate child that didn't have a fucking clue how to tie his laces, didn't have a clue about how the world operated. I would rather a child in my care who was like that, as opposed to a child that spends the entirety of their school life learning about sustainability and global citizenship and being in a gender-friendly environment to appease feminists. You know, it's anyway. So it says here, qualities in Glasgow. This was recorded on the 1st of December 2021. So as I say, my video was in 2019. I thought it was a sort of dead project, dead in the water. But nope, still a thing. But here we have, presented by the Equalities Education Team, we have Shagufta Ahmed, right? Very Glaswegian name, of course. And we got Nazut Atumani, Marilyn Gordon, Alexandra Hempler, and Samir Sharma. So a very diverse panel of people here. Marilyn Gordon could potentially be Scottish, but who fucking knows for a lunch? Maybe she's Kenyan. Who knows? One of them is Scottish, if I remember rightly. But aye, the rest of them, well, as you can tell by their names, maybe I'm being presumptuous. Silly me. Better be careful. Alan Smith might be watching. I might be on his database. But anyway, so I mean, I could play other parts of it, and I intended to do that on the stream that I did start a couple of weeks ago. When Mike Gate occurred, but to give you the gist of it, the first woman talks about, you know, equalities and things that they're implementing. So they've got obviously a focus on Black History Month, but wider understanding of opportunities to explore the wider curriculum, tackling discrimination, providing opportunities for young people to achieve positive sustained leaver destinations, which is absolutely anything provided you're not an adult when you leave school. So it could be a job, it could be a college, it could be Bernardo's, irrespective, as long as you're not an adult. Focus of curriculum during LGBT History Month, family learning events to promote equality activities. And I find that very malevolent as well, that they're trying to get, try to get the parents and whatnot involved. So kind of normalises that to a certain extent, reassures any concerned parents, re-educate them if need be, put them in a black book, report them if need be. But by and large, I find that strange. I find the whole thing strange, really, but we all know why it's occurring, don't we? It's polluting the youth, corrupting their minds. Really, it's no other way to describe it, because this isn't warranted nor justified. So we got here anti-racist curriculum development. We have CRER, C-R-E-R, Interfaith Glasgow, LGBT Youth Scotland. You get the point. So this is, she goes on about that for a wee while, so sorry. All school staff are responsible for promoting equality, challenging discriminatory behaviour, being positive role models, reporting discriminatory incidents following recording and reporting, recognise and tackle bias and stereotyping. Yeah, okay. Promote equality and social justice. Social justice, the talk of the town, is it not? It doesn't matter what subject matter, it's always social justice. And for a lot, this is something as well that I've considered, just in regards to trying to wake up people that you would consider normies with a lot of the issues that are occurring today. This is always one of the solutions at the end of it all. Whether it's, we need to tackle racism, we need to tackle climate change, we need to tackle this and that, all of these things combined. There's always an element of social justice gets mentioned. And you just think back to well before all this BS ever became a thing. When it was always the social justice wars, but there's been this constant progressive social justice-esque escapade that's been taking place for many a year. It's just gaining momentum and traction because the entirety of the state, irrespective of country, supports it. But it started off as fringe movements and fringe rhetoric from a bunch of weirdos in American college and university campuses, and it spread like wildfire everywhere. Now to the point where, again, it's been talked about in publications for children. Social justice. You need to have social justice at the heart of any climate, not any COVID recovery or any hypothetical economy after we mitigate the perils of climate change. Or anti-racism has to have social justice, evidence about social justice, and it just seems very strange that that's the same ideology that these whack jobs had back in the day with their bald and blue bowl cuts and whatnot, proclaiming that they were against the patriarchy. Same rhetoric, they've just managed to appear more presentable now, if you will. It's not just your everyday fruitcake. It's average people that peddle this shit, I know. But nonetheless, what else have we got here? As I say, don't want to go through the entirety of it. This is something. Oh yeah, I did want to make a video on this shit because I had a bit of a theory as to why they're heavily pushing this, but I think I'll leave that for now. Conscious of time and a temperamental mic, as I say. Story for another day, I guess. But it should be about here. There we go. So, the gender-friendly nursery. I mean, I just don't know what the fuck to say at this point. I mean, some of the publications, especially in the recent weeks, maybe month or so, some of the publications I've gone through, and some of the descriptives to describe the agendas that are taking place, whether it's global citizenship's definition or learning for sustainability, when you read through some of the stuff that it entails, incorporates, encompasses, some of that can make for hard reading when you consider the fact that it's targeted at children. But when you see something like that, I mean, there's not really much lore that these people can sink when they're going after children in nursery settings to pursue allegedly some feminist dream. Gender-friendly nurseries. Wow. Just can't leave children alone, can they? But anyway, might as well let the woman speak for herself. I've done enough rambling. Today.
Hi, good evening. So I'm going to talk briefly about the gender-friendly nursery programme. So the gender-friendly nursery approach in Glasgow aims to tackle gender stereotyping and make sure that children and staff in the early year setting are not in any way limited because of their gender. So it's founded about 6 years ago by Susie Hayward and Barbara Agilich from Health Improvement NHS in Glasgow. And to date, the figures are staff from about 80 nurseries have been involved, including about 300 individual staff. There are 5 nurseries in Glasgow that have been awarded the gender-friendly nursery status, and around 11 more are working towards it at the moment. So let's see why it's necessary to challenge stereotypes and how the gender-friendly nursery approach works. So you can see these boxes here, and from the time we're born, we're receiving messages about what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl. And
many millennia, even generation after generation after generation, there was never an issue in relation to this. But again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in relation to the people that kind of pull the strings at the top, that produce a lot of the funding for programs such as this, the entities that you don't see. When it comes to things such as caring and nurturing, you know, and being more empathetic, etc., being nice, well behaved. These are all sort of motherly traits. They're trying to eradicate them. They're trying to assert this idea that a lot of these things are natural to women as opposed to boys, or men even. And they're trying to insert this narrative that these aren't natural concepts. These are things that are they're ingrained into the mindsets of women because of stereotypes that have occurred when they were young. And even if that was to be believed to a certain extent, even if we take them at face value and we go along with what they're presenting and say that, okay, they're correct to suggest that none of these things are in fact inherent and they are indeed the results of stereotypes, what's so wrong with that? Because if we were still a society that focused and prioritised families, that wouldn't be an issue. The only fundamental issue as far as these feminists are concerned is they are devoid of these natural womanly or motherly instincts because they've become so engrossed in an ideology. But second of all, they look at disparities and they don't see enough Claires and Sarahs in CEO positions. So they need to get to the root of the problem because it's just fucking unacceptable. So the best way to do that is to go into the mindset of every little girl in the country and fuck around with their brain the same way as the boys in the process. You know, they're quite prepared to worm their way in and just, you know, completely infiltrate academia in order to socially engineer, coerce, mindfuck, if you will, children because they're unhappy with stereotypes allegedly being responsible for disparities in later life. You know, well, there's not enough women in this role, there's not enough women in that role. And they find it unacceptable. Maybe have they ever considered to themselves that maybe the women that they're referring to when they're pointing to disparities, maybe they're quite content with life? Oh, not enough women going to STEM. Well, that needs to change. You know, that must be the boys' fault. It must be stereotypes. But they obviously would have picked a subject, as opposed to a STEM-related subject, they would have picked something else that they were interested in. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. And that's for the section about boys. The same thing applies there, because back in the day, and I don't know how far back we need to go at this point, but I would maybe make the argument my grandfather's generation, or the generations prior to that, when men were men and women were women, you know, and there was no fucking argument about it. And they got on quite fine. This bullshit about oppression and misogyny being rife, it's always been there. There was elements of it, naturally, I'm not disputing that. But men and women were different, but equal at the same time, in terms of the fact that they needed one another. Their opposites essentially attracted, as cliche as it sounds. But regarding the boys there, you know, immature, active, boisterous, getting into physical fights, rough and tumble, you know, because this is the sort of things that prepare them for as they get older. Because naturally, if we're going to go way, 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 way back in the time machine, it kind of goes back to ancient tribalism and whatnot. Men were fighters, protectors. So these are the sort of things that are inbuilt into boys. There's no stereotyping involved as far as I'm concerned. You see it from a very, very young age, from what I recall of my childhood. There was not even a father in my life. I grew up with my mother and I still acted exactly the same way as other boys did when I was in the company of myself, even before I went to nursery. My mother reaffirmed these stories. I acted the exact same way you would expect me to act if there was a father in the household. You know? But I guess I would probably be considered an outlier or a liar to these individuals. But again, they've got issues with this. So fucking what if these are these are stereotypes? These are things that, again, these aren't inherent to boys and vice versa. No. These are placed upon them by society. And even if that was to be believed, so what? Anyway.
And they kind of dictate what we expect from children, and they can be rather damaging, to say the least.
Of course.
Next slide, please, Leanne. So the boxes continue into adulthood, as I'm sure we're all aware, and stereotypes are just really oversimplified and unrealistic ideas of what it means to be in a particular group, and just...
See, again, it's misleading. That's not what it means to be a woman, or that's not what it was seen, what it used to be to mean to be a woman, if you know what I mean. And the same for a man. But a man, irrespective of whether or not you have these traits, you know, biology dictates that, determines that. You know, and there's always outliers, irrespective of which gender or sex we're talking about here. Even going back to the child at school age, you know, tomboys, and I don't think there was ever a name for the female, or the boy equivalent. Gay. I don't know. But nonetheless, like, you were a woman or a man, regardless. But again, it's kind of referring back to a lot decades ago, at the very bare minimum, when men were men. They were the providers. The man of the house looked after his family, and the woman cared for the family. And hence the bottom one there, especially, or two there, caring and nurturing, and family before career, and that's seen as something that's unacceptable. You know, bear in mind, as I said, this is all happening in the backdrop of record low birth rates, and we have the feminists still at their bullshit, still at it, with Mama Chief Mammy Sturgeon, thin lips, with her Brill Cream bowl cut, the most fucking hideous petri dish hairstyle I've ever seen on a woman, by the way. I know they like to make a point of having ludicrous hairstyles because they are, I don't need no man, I'm a feminist, you know, fuck the patriarchy, all this shit, right? But that looks like it was grown in a petri dish and glued on her bald face, on her bald head. You know, it's like a wig that was grown in a petri dish. A chemical spillage. It doesn't look like hair. I don't know what she's done to it, right? But it's just, I don't know. I think I spend too much time having to absorb S&P bullshit, so every time I see her hair, it irritates me, right? A lot of people arguably get irritated by Sturgeon herself. That's the hair that pisses me off the most, right? But that's a different point. So again, it's family before career. That has to change. And the opposite on the boys' side, it's career before family, right? I mean, I would make the argument, you know, sort of on their side, if you will, that there's no harm in a man prioritising his family. But again, this is harkening back to days where the man was the breadwinner, essentially. It's like they're stuck in the past. These stereotypes that they proclaim are very prevalent in today's society, they're not the same as they once were. It's not expected of women to behave this way. It's not expected of a woman to be the family provider, the family carer, or the nurturer, etc. You know, it's not expected anymore. They're seen no differently to men. They're just seen as a statistic in the workforce, which is a sad indictment of how far we've fallen as a society, if you want my opinion. We should be trying to do things to actively reverse these trends, but instead we persist on worsening them. And one of the fundamental ways to continue to worsen them is when you have feminists with free range and carte blanche to continue their bullshit at every fucking age group in our schooling systems, peddling nonsense, worsening these trends. And what it means to be a man, gender stereotypes, violent. You know, not all men are violent, so that's bullshit. So if a man's not violent, is he not a man then? Same thing applies, like, don't cry, you know, strong, dominant. Back in the day, you probably was more expected of a man back then as opposed to now. You know? Sporty, muscular. Again, back in the day, it was kind of the in thing. But even we go way, way back in the day, you know, poverty-stricken Britain, after the war, etc. No, come on, fuck. Anyway.
We do not fit neatly into these boxes.
No, and so what? So what? So everything needs to come tumbling down and everything has to be deconstructed because you don't fit nicely into that box. I don't fit into the box for men, completely. So fuck a man though. I mean, it doesn't bother me that I don't tick all that's in that box. You know?
Next slide, please. And they're not just boxes, the messages that create these boxes are everywhere and they get louder and louder by the day. And the messages are reinforced through TV, cartoons, characters, toys, clothes. Just think about the slogans on supposedly girls' t-shirts as opposed to boys' t-shirts.
Again, something that in recent times they've all, like society, whether, you know, the powers that be, government, etc., and just lefties in media in general, they've gone out of their way to actively start to change that. You know, this video would make sense if it was recorded in 2000 or the 1990s or even before that. But to make this video at the very last month of 2021, just before 2022, and to act as if this is still a prominent issue, especially with newly released programs and newly released clothes, etc., it's not the same as it once was. I mean, they can't be that daft, surely. They're either thick as fuck or very disingenuous and deceptive on purpose in order to justify continuing to push this. These are not things that are as prevalent and prominent as they once were. And again, I don't even see the issue with things being there that could indirectly or directly coerce, if you will, or help to construct the women of the future and the men of the future by helping to reaffirm who they are. I don't see what the issues are with that. The issue for these people, these feminists, is that this leads to not enough Janes and Sarahs and CEO positions, as I said, as opposed to anything else.
You just become more and more aware of the kind of wording, the colors, the design. And then as we get older, through things like games, videos, fashion, beauty, pornography, social media, film and TV, I'm sure we're all aware of these things. So it can appear normal, but what's the harm?
Ooh.
What happens when we reinforce these stereotypes over and over again? Next slide, please. So there is evidence that big issues are made worse or even caused by this gender inequality.
Did you hear that? It's gender inequality, apparently. So what she's just yammered on about there, that's by default defined as gender inequality. But it says, why is this a problem? And it says, relationships, sexual health, and parenting. I don't know, I can't recall if she elaborates on this. Gender-based violence, well, that's very misleading. Obviously, I've gone over that many times in regards to what it really means, because it's disparities, etc. It's not just a case of a man beating up a woman. It's more a case of why it occurs, power imbalances, etc., etc. LGBT issues. Okay, so I assume you're referring to the T as opposed to anything else in that respect. Something that really calls, the T argument, that really has blown a hole in the sort of feminist narrative regarding gender stereotypes and all the rest of it. Because why is it then that transgenders? We always knew that Tom was actually Rachel because Tom liked to play with dolls, but the feminists will simultaneously tell you that girls only play with dolls because society forces them to do so. So if it's a social construct, then theoretically these transgender children, they should be able to play with what they want, but for some reason if they play with toys or they wear clothes or they assign quote-unquote gender, that's somehow clear-cut proof that they're transgender. It's very strange, actually. So I'd be interested if she elaborates on the LGBT issue. Men and boys' mental health. This is also something that's very deceptive. Now, I'm not as well versed as others on this subject, but I've listened to enough people, and from my own observing it over time, as I've kind of delved into these topics over the years, more and more, a lot of the issues that we see in today's society with mental health for boys and men is because of, especially in the case of Scotland, but it's not limited to just Scotland, the way that education in particular has become very feminised. It's geared towards girls and women. And society's breaking down in all aspects, as I've referred to already. Men and women are not seen as the sort of how they once were. Families aren't being created, etc. And these are definitely things that are affecting men, especially when you look at the statistics in relation to how boys are falling behind, girls are doing better. And when they get into the 30s, a lot of women are actually earning more than men now. I don't know if that's a Scottish statistic or if it's a UK-wide one, but it's definitely close to home anyway. These are real things. These are things that are occurring. And mental health, etc., is now starting to increase for boys and in turn men. And as a result, there's also a lot of other issues, with the rise in these dating websites, etc., where, women have the pick of the bunch now. And because they're they're on a level playing field, quote unquote, they can pick any man they want. Makes it a lot more difficult now for average Joes. And that causes issues in and of itself. But the most evil thing about it that I've always found is the fact that then the feminist types, the people that are in part, at very least in part, responsible for a lot of the issues that men and boys face regarding their mental stability, their mental health, they will turn around and say that that's the stereotypes they've done. That's the toxic masculinity at play there. So what we suggest is we continue with our project to eradicate the gender stereotypes, because that will in time help to ease your mental suffering. When it's the fucking policies that have been implemented and the procedures that have occurred in the back off that are in part, at least in part, responsible in the first place. So it's very insidious, in my opinion. Employability, will have kind of already elaborated on that. Gender pay gap. They're gender pay gaps. So they love this gender pay gap shit. So again, it's not enough Janes and Sarahs and CEO positions. It's too many Maxwells and Paddies. Right? We got body image. Again, that's got you can make the argument to a certain extent to the previous slide, but Come on. Parenting. Right, okay.
And you'll see some examples on the slide, including violence against women, high male suicide rate, eating disorders, homophobia and transphobia, and gender differences in educational outcomes and career destinations.
Which is fundamentally their biggest gripe, their biggest point of contention. You know? As I said, the video that I uploaded yesterday. They'd only been in Parliament after the recess for half an hour or to an hour, and sure enough, the first quote feminist of the day popped up to make a point of saying that 84%, or it was 86, one of the two, of computing science students in Scotland annually, men. That's unacceptable, has to change. What more can be done? What is being done? And then there it was. Yet another reference to the fact that Education Scotland is currently working with a team to, infiltrate the nurseries, early learning, etc. They didn't specify nurseries, but early learning is nursery and above. So it just sort of ties in nicely with this. They're really going after it, and it's always the same. They justify it by insisting that because of the stereotypes, the inherent stereotypes, that only they have the ability to break down and eradicate completely and replace with their own ideology. Only they have that capability of doing so. They know best because they're feminists. They know fucking best, apparently. But, all ties in. All ties in. And it's all about the fact that disparities exist. But beneath the surface, whether or not they realise, there is a much more malevolent act at play here, and that is ensuring, or at very least playing a pivotal role in ensuring that the birth rates do not reverse. These problems just worsen as time goes on, because how many girls will grow up to be women that are more career driven, etc. And bear in mind, some of them will even grow up to be feminists on the back of the bullshit that they've been taught at younger and younger ages with their corrupt minds. There will be some that will naturally in time go on to have a child, whether or not it's planned. But they'll put it off till later life. There'll be many that are career focused. There'll be some that just don't want children in general. This is becoming a pattern, and you cannot honestly say that it cannot be related, at least in part, to what we're witnessing in our education system. Or at the very bare minimum, this isn't helping.
And these things have the potential to affect all of us, whether we are male or female.
Nice of you to mention men.
What can we do in early years? Next slide, please.
And then we chuckle there. Oh, what can we do? What can we do?
I think this is such a fascinating topic to delve into more deeply. And if you are inspired to look in depth, then this is an excellent recent report just published this year by the Fawcett Society. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that and ponder further. Next slide, please. And the good news is there are lots of fun ways to...
I remember this. Have I still got that on my channel? 2 seconds. Jesus Christ, 5 years ago. Holy shit. But I knew I'd fucking seen that before. Fucking hell. 2016 too. Wow. But the premise of that video, if I remember rightly, was it? I think it says sign in the description actually. Redo this video with a model, a secretary and a ballerina being drawn, then have 3 men walk into the classroom, observe how many men get offended, guarantee you that nobody would give a damn. Right, because the premise was that they were asked the children in the classroom were asked to draw a fireman, I can't remember, a doctor or a nurse or something, and there was another one. Oh my god.
I never ever gave that a second thought when I was that young.
Oh, fuck's sake. But, what have we got? A dog, and a soldier or something. And then, naturally, the vast, I think the entire class draws men. And then, lo and behold, they're all women. Oh my god. And then there's this massive, cope about the fact that, this is offensive and harmful and whatnot. But, they picked, the most cliche fucking, male-orientated jobs. When you think of a nurse, which is not really much different in a hospital capacity to that of a doctor, when you think of a nurse, you mostly think of a female. There's plenty of male nurses. Well, it's just one example. The list is endless, but this is like some sort of gotcha, because naturally it makes your mind wander, and then you get fooled. But that's it, though. As I say, you can do this with plenty of job roles that are female, stereotypically. You're not going to see offended males, though. And again, that's another thing about feminists. And the one, women are strong, so strong, but they get so offended. Or these feminist types do anyway. They get so offended over fucking nonsense. But anyway, let's get back to it.
Stereotypes. There's the lovely little video clip you could perhaps look at later if you just simply Google a firefighter, a surgeon, a fighter pilot. You'll come up with this lovely little video, which is a beautiful example of how we can challenge stereotypes and expose children to things that are out with the perceived norm. So kids were asked to draw these three characters. They were asked to draw a firefighter, surgeon,
already explained
and
that, so we can move on.
pilot. Firefighter, surgeon, and a fighter pilot. And only 5 were clipped to bring home the message.
Wait, what?
Next slide, please. 3 characters. They were asked to draw a firefighter, surgeon, and a fighter pilot. And of the nearly 70 drawings, so we've got 61 pictures were drawn as men, and only 5 were drawn as women.
Well, there's still 5 more that would have been. Well, there's still 5 more that were drawn. 5 less would have been drawn if these stereotypes were rampant and rife and infected every mindset of every child in the vicinity. But yeah, that's here nor there. That's irrelevant, you know. But so to create nurseries where children, staff and families are not limited by the social expectations placed on them because of their gender, and where everyone can be protected from the many limiting negative consequences, and they define what's a negative consequence, by the way, of gender inequality. Again, what gender inequality, it's like, I feel sometimes that I have to repeat myself because every time I read their shit, it's the same shit. You just in the off chance that there's a newcomer, but I just hate when they refer to things like gender inequality, because it's not how it sounds, obviously. You know, when you really break it down, it's not how it's defined in the dictionary, for example. It's not how it would have been defined years ago when feminism actually had a fucking purpose, if you will. Argument. You could make an argument for even first wave feminism and whatnot. But now it's all about power imbalances and the lack of BAMEs or CEOs, etc. As I said, Jane and Sarah, they're now in the CEO positions, and that's a problem. That showcases a lack of power. And until they equal out the playing field and they level the power imbalances and make things equal, quote unquote, or at least 50-50 in every aspect of society, then this gender inequality will still be rife. So it's not the same thing.
So hopefully you can see that stereotypes are not harmless. And that
she keeps breaking out into little laughs there when she's referring to this shit. And I mean, that could be nerves or whatever. I'm not going to poke fun at her for that, but I mean, it's just like she's not really saying anything. She's reading slides as if we're supposed to just take these feminists at their words. You know, post all the fucking links you want. At the end of the day, all you're doing is passing on links for parents to go and get more reassurance from other feminists who share the same fucking worldview.
Really limiting for all of us, for young
of us.
children.
They have to include the boys in there as well. We're all included. Nah, you go fuck us about the women. It's all about that disparities, and you know it. So what we got here? Summary of process. Attendance for the virtual training sessions, cascade learning, they receive awards. That's lovely. So we've got a case study, the centre playgroup. That might even be what was included in the video that I made back in the day about it. But look at some of the shit they do. So they changed from blue and pink graduation gowns, new gender neutral end of term gifts, right? Purchase of a range of inclusive and non-stereotypical books. Incorporated GFN into playgroup policy handbook website. All staff attended training because they need to be retrained in order to be able to adequately promote the poison. It's lovely. That's, they go through all the necessary steps in order to become teachers. And by the way, there's too many fucking female teachers and too many feminists in teaching. You could even make the argument for. And I would say that's a major issue in academia. We need some men in there, and I don't mean wet white men who share the same word. Oh, I'm a male feminist. No, I'm talking about a man's man, or is that an issue? We can't have that because they might start talking about patriarchal things, you know. And but they shouldn't even be in these positions at all to socially engineer children. They should not. And this isn't just the nursery. This isn't just in general. They're supposed to be there to teach. They're not supposed to be there to promote social fucking justice and global citizenship and everything that Nicola Bibbin Thin-Lipped Sturgeon has told them to. Oh, but they got the cop out for that. Oh, it's devolved. We don't have any input. Oh, fuck off. Just fuck off. Sick of that cop out. Sick of it. Yeah, they might not necessarily rubber stamp everything that gets passed down on to every single school across the country, but at the end of the day, it's their fucking worldview that's been promoted. So for Kebab fucking Stewart, I might even play the video just to showcase what I'm talking about, where she's sitting there talking about how schools are, education's presented in a sort of unbiased manner. Are you wise? You know, no normal right wing type person, traditionalist, conservative minded person, and I mean like old school or just at the bare minimum literal conservative types would ever agree with half, if not all, of the nonsense that schools peddle in Scotland nowadays. And they audacity to sit and brag about the fact, education in Scotland and the curriculum of excellence promotes things in a non-biased, non-partisan way. Fuck off. Or global citizenship. Well, did you all agree on that one? Or did the UN tell you to do that? You know, fucking people, man.
Just a few examples of some of the things that they implemented.
Yeah. So bold, so progressive, you know, just in the off chance that you might one day get to see Jane as a CEO, you know. Fuck the ramifications this might have for society, because it's all about that feminism, girl power, yeah. Fucking evil, man. What else have we got? Is this the same thing? No, it's equality, betting equalities in secondary school, and I mean, like, there's more, obviously, but from a secondary position. But I might just leave it on that for the time being, because one, the microphone might, for all I know, have cut out yet again, and two, it's 40 odd minutes long, so I think ideally it's probably too long as it is. No point in making it much longer. But just to sort of conclude, gender friendly nurseries. So, and as it's prominent in Glasgow, I can't remember exactly. I didn't hear it properly. I might play it back, where she said how many there were currently in Glasgow.
Glasgow aims to tackle gender stereotyping and make sure that children and staff in the early year setting are not in any way limited because of their gender. So it's founded about 6 years ago by Susie Hayward and Barbara Agilich from Health Improvement NHS in Glasgow. And to date, the figures are staff from about 80 nurseries have been involved, including...
She said either said 18 or 80 nurseries, so I'm just referring to the subtitles, but I couldn't be certain. But nonetheless, that's far too many. Far too fucking many, if I'm being honest.
Including about 300 individual staff. There are 5 nurseries in Glasgow that have been awarded the gender-friendly nursery status, and around 11 more are working towards it at the moment.
Okay, so I could arguably be 18 then. I don't know. Nonetheless, gender-friendly nurseries. I mean, what? I don't know to say at this point. It's just another facet of the bigger issue that's going on here, where we seem to be on a one-way ticket to that sweet sustainability, you know. And don't take my word for that. The Sustainable Development Goals, yeah. Number 5, gender equality. Reduce that inequality. So the feminists have got carte blanche. Why do you think feminism's in there? You know, sustainability on a grand scale, long term, is about reducing the population worldwide, because fundamentally, according to these people, there's just far too many people on the planet for things to remain sustainable as things stands. They claim that there's overpopulation and a lack of resources, so that's unsustainable. So why would they be promoting in and around all this bullshit? gender inequality or gender equality? Well, it's twofold. Obviously, it's the feminism, which causes never-ending division across society when they get carte blanche to do as they please, which we're seeing in Scotland. Has ramifications, of course, but above all else, it's the justification required to do as they're doing, which in turn reduces birth rates, or ensures that the birth rates do not reverse. It ensures that the bullshit that's been in the pipeline for some time is allowed to continue unabated. You know, and as for this quality education, fucking Jesus Christ. You know, I don't know. Anyway, peace.